I actually got a comment on one of the previous videos where someone said that, why don't you, because what I've been doing is I've been saying that I'm gonna to create a unique call ID for the calls, the phone calls in the app. I need to combine the user ID of the first person that's going to be in the call and then the user ID of the second person that's going to be in the call. And we're going to combine that to create a an ID for the actual phone call. But someone just pointed out, which is super obvious really, or it should be super obvious, but it hasn't been to me, that if we have a model in the database that just keeps track basically of the calls. So a model called call, and the call has user A and user B in it, then if we have that model in the database, that model will have an ID, a unique ID. And so instead of combining the user's ID, we can just take the ID of the actual model in the database, which makes a lot of sense. So that's what we are going to do instead, which I think we are doing, or I haven't really gotten anywhere with that. So I think we do not necessarily need to change anything. Let's have a look. Okay, so potentially this could be called call instead. And it doesn't have calls. It just has caller ID. And then it has called ID. A.id. Okay, maybe something like this, I think, could work. So now we have called, which is just a thing where it says that it belongs to a call, and user ID. So then it ends up here. I'm not really sure how this works, but I think it should work. So called ID is the ID of the person that was called, and that has one called person, and that is a user, and we want the user ID, which is then going to be this variable. So then up here we have to have a called variable that belongs to the call, and that is the user ID. It's a little bit too complicated. I feel like this. I sort of kind of get it once I go back into it and start working with it again. But if I leave for like 4 days, which I've done now, or 5 days, something like that, and come back to it, I'm just lost again, because it's just a little bit too. I don't know. I feel like it's hard to understand like which one should go where and what should it look like and where does the stuff end up. I think this is how it's supposed to be, but it's very hard to explain it, at least for me. Okay, I'm starting to think maybe this won't work actually, because the way that I've made it now is I forgot about this, but I created a function on Lambda that's supposed to sort users into call lists, so that each user has a list of people they're going to have a conversation with. And if we, well, the idea is that each user would have then a call list, a unique call list for each event that they attend. And I think that the best way to do that is to have just one model in the database that is called call list. Well, actually, we could have more models. We could have one model that is called call list that keeps track of the lists for each event. And then we could have one model which is a call, which is a specific call that has all the information about that call. Okay, I'm just realizing I think we need more models. I feel like I have so many models right now, and I don't want it to get out of hand where I'm like creating more models than I actually need. But I don't know really what the best the best practice is with this. If it's like you'd rather create the smallest models possible, so each model should just be responsible for the smallest thing, or the least amount of stuff, and then you can have a lot of models, or whether you want to create like as few models as possible so that you have, I don't know, maybe that's a good idea. But I think that we need to reset this to be a call list model, because I think we need to have a list. We need to have an easy way to keep track of the phone calls that each user is going to have for each event. Because in each event we have problems that come up, which is like we don't want to double book someone, so we don't want one person to be booked for a phone call with two people at once. And I think an easy way to keep track of that is to have a model in the database that we can just call for each user. So we could call that model, we could check, okay, is their list full for this event, or do they have, and which ones are they talking to? Has this ID been seen somewhere else? I don't know how much sense that makes when I say it, but I feel like that's what we need. Create a call. So we have a caller, Daenerys. We have Ned Stark, and then we have an event ID. So that seems to be good. Okay, I'm trying to think this through, but this is now what I think that we should have. So we should have a user that has a list of calls, and that could then be just a simple call. So each specific individual call, and each call is just the ID of the call and the caller one, or the ID of user one and the ID of user two. So basically, one call is between two people, so we have the ID of the first person and the second person. So as you can see here, caller one, ID is one, and user ID here is 1, so this is the user that is in here. And then we could have a completely separate model, maybe. I'm trying to think this through, but I think we could have a completely separate model that's called call list, that has the ID of the call list. And then that contains all the calls that are going to be made for this specific event, for this specific user. So each event will have unique call lists for each user. So then I think we have to have, but I'm really struggling to try to think this through properly, because we could also have, I don't know which way is the best, because I don't know which way is going to be the easiest to query from the database once the app is actually like built. Because I don't really know all the use cases. So when a user signs up for the event, they join the event. When they join the event, we want to get a list. We want to create a list for them of users. So when a user joins an event, create a call list for that user. So then we have user A that signs up, and then we need to get then Okay, I'm trying to think of like how do you go about sorting people into groups so that you make sure that they never overlap. And I just created this like matrix here to sort of understand for myself like what would it look like and how difficult is it? Is there any rules that we can see? But essentially, what do we need? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we can actually, let's do this. Okay, so this is what it's actually going to look like. We're going to have 6 people in the phone call. And all of these 6 people need to have a list of 6 people, or rather 5 other people that they're going to talk to. Wait, how does it work? I can talk to 6 people in one phone call, which means that we need to have 1 more row. Actually, I don't know if this even does anything at all for my case. Because I just realized that, well, it doesn't even have to be, like this is not even going to be what works, I don't think. Like, A will be in a phone call with B first, and then A will be in a phone call with C, and then A will be in a phone call with D, and then A will be in a phone call with F, but this is not how it's going to work, because A will be a male, let's say, and then B will be a female, and then C will be a male, female, male. if that's the case, and we assume that they're straight, then this male will be talking to a female first, but then it will be talking to a male, which is not what's going to be the case. So I think this whole thing doesn't really matter. I'm trying to think of like what are the edge cases, or what could go wrong when we sort people into groups, because we basically need to make sure that if I create a list for user A, then I need to make sure that every person that I add to that list, that each of those people are first of all going to be in the event, and that their lists aren't full, and then that they are available for this person. But I don't know when we're going to sort the lists, because maybe I don't know math well enough, I don't think, to know if like, because what I want to figure out is maybe if we have, like, let's say that there's like if user A and user B has a list of users that they're going to talk to. Wait, this is so... my brain is just not ready to think about these things right now for some reason. So let's try to think. I'm trying to think if I can like demonstrate this in some way. Okay, so the way that I'm thinking about it is that, or I think this is true. Is this true? Oh my god, this is so difficult. So what I was thinking first is that, okay, as long as we limit each person to exist in a specific number of other people's call lists. So let's say that each user can have a list of 6 people that they're going to call for a call list. Then we could limit each user so that they can only show up. Okay, so then we can limit each user so that they can only show up in 6 other people's call lists. Because that means that if they only show up in 6 other people's call lists, then my thinking was that we can always arrange them differently so that, for instance, if the case was that there were only 4 other women, then woman B, see, okay, so let's say that this was the case. Even if each person, each woman A shows up in the first place of each guy's list, then we could actually arrange this later to be, well, we'll put woman A down here for cow, and then do woman C up here, and just arrange it so that woman C, A, and B, B, C, and A, and then A, B, and C. That way we can actually arrange it later on to make sure that no one clashes. But the problem comes in when we say that, well, what if we have woman Q here instead? And we have woman W or woman Z here, let's say. Because then we have, and this is where I'm not really sure how that's going to work, but I think that the problem could be then that we don't have, that we can't just create the positions later, but we have to actually create them first. Okay, so I just need to think this through because I don't really understand it myself and I don't know what I'm talking about. So I need to think about it. Okay, so I'm trying to go through this and figure out how it could work. Like this table is probably a bit of a mess for you to look at, but I created 3 users here, 3 men. Unfortunately, I'm just gonna go with woman A, B, and C because I'm bad at coming up with names, but and I find it just kind of easy to come up with these stupid names for guys, but so we have Ben, Don, and Chad, and we have Cal, John, and Ned. And what I wanted to see is if it's pretty easy if we have 3 men and 3 women, and they're all connected to specifically each other, and they don't interact with any other tables in the database. If they are all connected with each other and they are all going to talk with each other in some way, then that's kind of easy. But what if one of these users is in another table? Does that mess things up? And I'm not sure that this actually is a scientifically like a way to actually understand this or know if it does or doesn't. So I'm not sure how much clarity I actually got from this. But from what I understand, like let's say that I am in this table here. So I'm gonna have a chat with woman A, I'm gonna have a chat with woman C, but in the middle here, I actually ended up in woman woman D's table. Then what I wanted to know is, does that mess things up, or can we still sort these tables out afterwards? And it seems like we actually can do that as long as there are like an even amount of people in the entire app or in the event itself, which I think we can control for, I think. But if there's an even amount of people in the entire app, then based on this very non-scientific test, I think we can actually manage to always have someone available for a phone call, as long as we limit the amount of spaces that they can show up in. So as long as John can only show up in 3 other women's lists, then we should always be able to sort it in a way that ensures that there aren't duplicate calls. I'm going to ask ChatGPT about this too, because I think ChatGPT might be good at actually answering this. Okay, I don't really know what I asked ChatGPT now, but I tried to explain it. All right, I actually think I did solve this in my head before. So, I don't know, it's called like a bipartite graph or something. Bipartite graph. Not sure if I'm saying that correctly. But it essentially means that if we allow each user's list to fill randomly with other users, but we restrict it so that each user can only show up in 6 other people's lists, then we can actually sort the list out later, and it will guarantee that they won't, we will be able to sort the order out so that no one will overlap, as far as I understand this. Which is what I was sort of thinking when I was haphazardly trying to create this little thing. It did seem like we can actually sort it out later, and ChatGPT seems to confirm it based on my whatever explanation I tried to make or create to ChatGPT. So those two things, I think, mean that we can actually that we don't really have to bother too much about the order of the lists for each user until the actual calls happen. I think. Okay, so then we have to think through what is the actual call going to be to the database when we try to sort this. So what we want to do is we want to, from the database then, we want to get the calls from the database. We want to see, so okay, we have user A, and we want to create a call list for this user. So then what we want to do is we want to get user B, let's say, or find all the users that are women. So find all users of opposite gender, or rather of preference gender, where their okay, so when we find all the users of the preferred gender, then we can try to just add a user to user A's list. So try to add All right, so this is what we're going to try to do. So for user A, when they join an event, then what we want to do is we want to find all the users of their preferred gender, where the gender or where the preference of those users is also equal, so that it like matches. So if my preferred gender is woman, then we also want the woman's preferred gender to be man, and that way we get that user. And then we get all of those users that we can find. In the future, we'd have some sort of way to actually sort that out better, because we want to, this is going to be where the actual algorithm, like matching algorithm, would happen. So in the future, we're going to abstract that into, or I think that's the right word, into a separate function, Lambda function on the database or on the server side, where we actually like look at things like distance, maybe interests, things like that, and sort out which ones we're actually gonna add to this list. But for now, we're just gonna use the gender thing. And then after we've got a list of just all the possible potential matches for this user, then we'll go through each user in that list and we'll get all of the calls that with the event ID for this specific event. And we'll see if this user has more or exists in more than 6 other people's call lists. And if it does, then we won't add it to the list. If it doesn't, then we'll add it to both user A's list and to the user that we've just gotten from the database, their list as well. And then we'll go through and do that. And then later on, we'll have some sort of sorting algorithm once all the users have joined the calls or the event. We'll have some sort of sorting algorithm that will actually figure out who should go where and all of that stuff. But I think this means that we really just need this model, a call, because when we get it from the database, we can actually, this is probably going to be the way that we do it. So I don't think we need a model called call lists as well. I don't think. All right, I think I have a solid start on what I need to do for the next steps here. I think the next thing is going to be to create the Lambda function which, well, we need to create one Lambda function to create an event, I think. I don't really know how to deal with or how to handle creating events, because the events will be created by me or by the whatever team it will be maybe in the future. On the backend side, like, it won't be something that the users create themselves. So this will be an event that I actually manually create to start out with. And I don't know what the best practice for that is, because is it just to create a Lambda function that creates an event where I just manually go in and set the dates myself and add it to the database? Or is there some other way? I don't really know. What I'm going to start with, at least, is going to be to just test this whole thing out. So we're going to try to create a event in the database, and then based on that event ID, we can create the calls. We can set up like user interactions, or we can basically do a fake event, I think, at this point, because I think we have 2 female users and 2 male users in the database. So we can actually use them to create a fake event with calls and with everything. And so I need to create the backend functions for creating the event, and then for setting up the call lists for the users, and then for test running an actual call will be the last step, I think. Because then at the final thing is going to be, once the user is in the event, an event list for the user, so that we have just an easy way of getting like which events has this user been attending or attended, and which events have they signed up to. I think that's something that we need to have. Just so that when we actually, in the final part of this, when there is an actual event and we try to get the call list for that user, we need to know like what is the event and where do we get the event. And the way to get it, I think, is going to be to have it be part of the user model, because if the user model has a list of their events, then we can just we can have a look at the list of their events, maybe. Well, I don't know. Because what we want to do is we want to filter somehow. Like, we don't want to, let's say that a user has been on the app for 15 years, just as a, let's say, and there's one event every week, then they'll have like hundreds of events. And we don't necessarily want to be sorting through all of those events and doing like hundreds of calls to try to figure out which event is the one that is today. So I don't really know how to do that, but we need to figure that out. So let's write that down as a to-do. Some way to figure out the current event for the user. Okay, So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do that tomorrow. I felt a bit tired today, so my brain's just not been functioning the way that I was expecting maybe. But we still got some done. It's been about 2.5 hours and I'm pretty happy with the effort. We made progress, maybe not the best progress, but we made progress. So we'll see you in the next video on Wednesday.